Welcome to the Redemptorist Media Center from Bangalore, India. But the RMC is not limited to India. As we know from the global online novena to St. Alphonsus from last year and this year, RMC is indeed international. And here am I, a South African, joining my Redemptorist brothers in India and being part of this wonderful series that we offer you now. Teach us to pray. Of course, we know where those words came from. The apostles said to Jesus after watching him praying, "Lord, teach us to pray." And he began to teach them. Throughout the centuries, the Lord has used many of his followers and disciples to continue as his instruments of teaching us to pray. Our series entitled Teach Us to Pray will have various teachers throughout the centuries. We're going to be alphabetical, but there's also a good reason for that. As Redemptorists, we put Alphonsus first, and he happens to have a name that begins with A. So today our teacher will be St. Alphonsus, Doctor of Prayer. We must not be intimidated by the title of Alphonsus as Doctor of Prayer, because this is not an academic exercise. He was given that title by the Church because his teaching on prayer was simple. It was aimed at ordinary people in the daily struggles of their life. And so we turn to our wonderful Doctor of Prayer and his book, which was entitled, in his day, a very long title. We've shortened it today. In his day, it was How to Pray Continually and Familiarly to God as to Your Dearest Friend. Today, we have shortened that title to Praying to God as a Friend. Alphonsus was convinced that prayer was simply an expression of our friendship with God. We see that, for example, in God's great prophet Moses, where the book of Exodus says, whenever he went into the Holy of Holies, he spoke to God face to face like a friend. Jesus himself at the Last Supper said, "I no longer call you servants, I call you friends." So isn't this beautiful that St. Alphonsus picked up this message? At the heart of it all is prayer as a dialogue, as a conversation, as a communication with our dearest friend. Let's listen to these words from St. Alphonsus himself. Acquire the habit of speaking to God as if you were alone with God. Speak with familiarity and confidence as to your dearest and most loving friend. Speak to God often of your life, your plans, your troubles, your joys, your fears, of everything that concerns you. But above all, converse with God confidently and frankly. Speak all your thoughts freely, with confidence. Know that God does not wait until you come. He already anticipates you, and he comes to you. This relationship in friendship that God offers is a precious treasure through which all of us, poor and sinful though we are, can become dear friends of our God. So today, in our first lesson in the School of Prayer, as we, like the disciples, say to Jesus, "Lord, teach us to pray," today we want to learn the lesson of simple, familiar conversation with God. Isn't it true that when we meet people, when we initiate a conversation with a friend, that very often we begin with questions? How are you? Where have you been? Are you well? And so questions have an ability to get a conversation going. Do you know how many questions Jesus asked in the Gospels? How many of his direct words were in the form of a question? So what we're going to do to aid us in our conversation with God today is to listen to the questions of Jesus, maybe taken out of context, but they are still his words. And imagine that you are sitting face to face with him. He is in front of you and he's asking you a question. And all you have to do is give him your answer. What a wonderful conversation with God. And this is being true to the teaching of Alphonsus. Converse with God familiarly as with your dearest friend. Let us close our eyes for a moment. Imagine that we are in the presence of Jesus and he comes to us with some questions. And in the silence of our hearts, we give him our answer. Listen now to his questions one by one. What is it you want me to do for you? Perhaps in the silence of your heart, you are thinking of your many troubles and problems. And what you want him to do for you is to intervene, to come and help, to bless you, to heal. But let me not put words into your mouth. Listen again to the question and silently converse with him as you give him your answer. What is it you want me to do for you? Another question that Jesus often asked in the Gospels, and particularly of his nearest disciples, was this question: why are you afraid? Listen to that question again, but this time he's asking you. Why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Perhaps you want to tell him of your fears for your health or your safety, your fears of material insecurity, your fears for your children and for their health and safety. Very often for children who have left home and moved on to study or work elsewhere. So many of our fears we keep to ourselves, and he's saying, tell me, what are you afraid of? Spend a quiet moment, in all honesty as to your dearest friend, tell Jesus your fears. Sometimes the questions of Jesus are a little challenging. And very often, in response to sharing our fears, we will hear this question from Jesus: why did you doubt? Listen to that question again. In the silence of your heart, tell him, why did you doubt? Sometimes we doubt because We feel that our questions and our prayers are not being answered quickly enough. Our doubts come from our impatience. Our doubts come from the fact that we're not in tune with God's time. We want our time. Doubts come from many places in our fragile hearts. Let him ask you the question again, because behind his question really is a little statement that he's saying, that was silly of you. You don't need to doubt. Trust me. Listen to that question again. Why did you doubt? One of the most beautiful questions that Jesus ever asked was to Mary Magdalene, who had come to the tomb after hearing that the body of Jesus had disappeared. And John tells us that she stood outside the tomb weeping. And going in and bowing her head, she continued weeping. And there is this stranger to her, but she doesn't know who it really is. She thinks he's the gardener. And she hears this question. Why are you weeping? Now let's just forget the story for a minute and apply it to ourselves. Jesus is in our presence, and he asks you, why are you weeping? And in the silence of your heart, you give him your answer. Lord, I'm weeping because. Maybe it's because of a pain, of a suffering, of a loss. Each one of us has something in our life, sometime or other, that causes us to weep. But he wants us to tell him from the heart, why are you weeping? One of the strongest questions Jesus ever asked to his disciples was ultimately a question of faith, of their describing who they believed he really is. But he had to evoke that act of faith from them by asking them a question. Let's listen to that question as if he's asking it to you and to me today. Who do you say that I am? In the silence of our hearts, we give him our answer. We know what Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. But he's saying, who do you say that I am? In our own words, we tell him who he is to us, what he is to us, how he is to us. Who do you say that I am? The ultimate question of Jesus is the question of love. So important is it that he even asked St. Peter 3 times, do you love me? We are going to ask that same question 3 times. And we know Peter got a bit upset. Lord, you know everything. He got upset that he kept asking the same question. But Jesus never stops asking us that question. And this is the greatest prayer that we can ever make from our hearts, is this question from Jesus. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Indeed, we cannot improve on the answer that Peter gave. Let us make that our own in our conversation with the Lord. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it simple? Didn't Alphonsus, our great patron saint of prayer, get it right when he said that prayer is nothing more and nothing less than familiar conversation with God as with your dearest friend? Let us listen to the words of Alphonsus, our teacher today, as we end our lesson on prayer. In times of suffering, know that God will console you, or at least give you the strength to be patient. God will not be displeased if you seek consolation from your friends. However, God does wish to be the deepest source of your consolation. In other words, go to Him first. Know that the suffering will serve to strengthen you and to renew your confidence in God. The more weary and discouraged you may feel, the more confidently you need to cry out, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Prayers such as these will restore peace to heart, mind, and spirit. For none are lost who place their hope in God. Do not be afraid when you feel forsaken. Simply say, "O God, you know that I love you and long for nothing else but your love. Take pity on me, help me, do not forsake me." And we end with the prayer of St. Alphonsus. O God of love, you are and shall be forever the only delight of my heart and the sole object of my affections. Since Jesus said, "Ask and you shall receive," I do not hesitate to say, "Give me your love and your grace." That's what I ask for. Grant that I may love you and be loved by you. I want nothing else. Mary, teach me to love God as you did. Thank you for joining us today at our first session in our School of Prayer, Teach Us to Pray. And if anything has touched you in a special way, especially from the teaching of St. Alphonsus, or from your experience of your conversation with Jesus after his question, then feel free to share it in the comments. Or if you think that there's somebody you know who would be helped by this teaching of St. Alphonsus on prayer, press the share button and pass it on. We look forward to seeing you at our next lesson on prayer, where our teacher will be Saint Benedict, who will teach us how to pray using the Bible, using the Word of God. God bless you.